So as I mentioned, every year we hold a input session for the Community Development Block Grant Program. So many of you, I recognize your names or your organization names as you're familiar with the Community Development Block Grant Program, but this is also open to potential applicants that have never used or are not as familiar with the Community Development Block Grant Program. So we can hear from you guys on recommendations and ideas for our program. And then what we hear back today and like other feedback that we've received will be incorporated into our 2023 program design and program guidelines for this year. So yeah, this is like part one input session, and then once we have our finalized program design, we will hold our annual How to Apply workshop. That will be March 22nd from 10 to 11:30 a.m. And registration for that is open. If you go to our DHCD events webpage, you can go ahead and register for that. So if you're not familiar, the Community Development Block Grant Program was started in the 80s. It's funded federally, and then we at DHCD administer the state CDBG grant program. As part of a state grant program, Governor Youngkin's priorities do play a big role in what kind of projects we fund, what we recommend to the governor, and ultimately what he approves. So this is just some of his administrative priorities for the time that he is governor. And as you'll see, some of these relate directly to CDBG programs for small business and entrepreneurial support, affordable housing, mental health services, and then of course the bread and butter of CDBG to address water and wastewater infrastructure needs, usually in conjunction with housing or to support other housing efforts. And then also the CDBG program can be used to strengthen local and regional capacity. And we here at DHCD are a partner and try and do what we can to support other partnerships and strengthen those. So just gonna go dive right into it. The next slide, I will give you our current grant maximum award amounts. But something that we have heard from current grantees and some of our partners is that due to rising construction costs and supply chain issues and just like overall costs of what it takes to do a construction project, that our CDBG construction grant maximums, it would be very helpful if those were higher. So yeah, just wanted to open it up. This is our first like key area that we want to hear from you all. Would it be helpful if our grant award amounts were higher? This next slide shows our current base award amounts. The first one is local innovation, and that's community economic development. That's a like economic development open submission program. That current cap is $1 million. Community service facility, that maximum right now is $800,000. and that is part of our competitive round of CDBG programs. CCD is comprehensive community development. That's when there are at least 2 activities or 3, or ones that incorporate broadband as well. That is a competitive application, competitive program. That base is 1.3 million right now. Business district revitalization is 800,000 right now. Housing rehab, 1.25 million. Public infrastructure, 1 million. Housing production, 1 million. And then construction ready water and sewer is currently 800,000. So yeah, just want to hear from you all what, if you think that higher award amounts would be helpful for either current construction projects or future ones that you're thinking about doing or plan to apply for this spring. Yeah, would higher award amounts be helpful? And feel free to come off mute if you want to elaborate, or the chat.
So would land purchasing be considered in that for making housing? Because we don't have enough land to start housing. Also, would any of this development count towards a school or an elder facility?
So land purchasing is not really an active or an eligible CDBG purchase from the state level. Just the outcome, the benefit for the low to moderate income outcome is too far out when just purchasing land or acquiring the land. But if the production or rehabilitation of the housing, direct LMI beneficiary, and that would be eligible, so justified under the housing rehab or housing production. Elder care could potentially be a community service facility application, school funding, kind of ambulatory care, different types of municipality or locality driven functions are not going to be eligible for CDBG at the state level. And so we're generally seeing yeses across the board. Does anyone want to throw out some percentages of what overages they may be seeing on projects? We know water and sewer can be even double and triple the costs that they're seeing, but are there the idea that, you know, if we raise our maximum awards, we will fund less projects, and so it is a give and take. If we go up to a higher project amount, ultimately we'll fund less projects because we only have a finite amount of money. So are there percentages anyone's comfortable throwing out with what they would recommend raising some of these project ceilings to? And we can go through questions in a moment also.
Hey, Matt, it's Kenny Rogers from Circuit.
Hey, Kenny.
Janet Jonas and I have been talking, and she just put into the chat 25 to 50% increase in housing rehab bids. And I was going to say as a minimum 25%. We're constantly, when we receive bids, they're at least 20 to 25% higher than what we have estimated. And oftentimes we're still trying to negotiate to get them within the cost limits.
Thank you for that. Abbott, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, you're not really talking about changing the cost limits on the individual units per se. You're talking about the overall project caps, is what I'm understanding. So it gets down to the question of how many units do you want to see rehabbed in a CDBG project, if you will. So, I mean, I'll say that we're seeing a smaller, I mean, the money we're asking for right now isn't changing. It's kind of staying stagnant. It's just the number of units per project is going down as y'all have raised the the house limits a little bit. I guess that gets to y'all's question of how many units in a project area is a viable project, and how many multi-phase projects do you want to see? I mean, Carver Gardens was phase 3 with multi-years for everything along the way. That's just what you're going to see more and more of.
Great comments. And I think almost if we raise the project totals, some of that of per unit costs or linear feet costs, the different project components will have to increase also. It won't just be a higher maximum grant award with a same expectation of kind of the way just doing more projects or more units. I think you're exactly right, Abbott. So that kind of is baked in that we would have some increases in allowances for house units, linear feet, or construction elements of different aspects. And Janet, I'll get to you 1 second. There's a couple of comments about urgent need. And so the urgent need component is really relating to natural disasters and response to natural disasters. It has to be a declaration from the governor or a declaration of health from the state health commissioner. And then there are specific outlines in the program design and the urgent need fact sheet that we can point you to kind of get more in depth on urgent need. Happy to kind of go into that outside of this, how to apply. But if you have specific questions, feel free to let Rachel know, and we can walk you through the urgent need program. Janet, you had a question or a comment?
Actually, I'm just going to reiterate a little bit of one of the other comments I put in the chat. We are currently about to bid 4 projects whose PERs we did, or the architectural design in one case, we did over 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago. And, a lot has happened in those last 2 years. So our infrastructure pre-bid cost estimates are coming in hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what we had originally estimated. About 11% per year for the VDOT ones. And Bill, help me with the Bill Hartley, help me with the Calfee School. That one's probably another 25, 10, 15% over.
It probably will be, yeah.
So I guess my point here is that cycle between when we do our cost estimates for the grant application and when we actually go to bid is about 2 years. So, and the numbers play out to be just about that 11% VDOT for at least for the transportation ones, not that for the sewer ones I'm working on.
That's a great comment, Janet, on the timing. I think we'll have to, internally, we're looking at what we can do for past grant years and awards that are hitting a mark where, they're not having enough money. And if we can go up to allowances that we are having for future years. So can a 2021 project go up to a ceiling of 2023? We're having to wade through our allowances within the CDBG program through HUD to see if we can make those allowances if we have funding available. Oftentimes we use all of our funding per year, so we can't always go back and add a couple $100,000 to projects that are seeing these overages. But I think it's a great point, and where we can, we'll take that under consideration to try to think through past years. Janet, your point of the timing is actually a reason why you'll notice, we're doing this input session in February as opposed to November, December, like we normally do. We're condensing our CDBG timeframe a little bit, hopefully to have a quicker turnaround from application to award so that we don't have as much of that delay in the application to contract to bidding. It won't solve it all, but we're hoping to try to condense some of our processes and the application timing so that we can maybe hopefully get it down to a year or a year and a half of that 2 years. And see, hopefully, maybe some efficiencies, but next year you can let us know how this process is going and what we need to improve there too. But that's kind of the iteration of why the timing is changed from years past. So, Abbott, I believe you had your hand back up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for us, I know y'all have recently raised your cost limits in the not too distant past for the rehab side of the house. But what we have the biggest challenge with is I know y'all have raised the substantial allowances, but there's no way we can build a house for $150,000 on this side of the state. You just can't. You can't build it. So we're putting a lot of county funds into these projects. If y'all ever given any thought to kind of like area specific limits, because there are certain areas in the state that are higher cost. I mean, the cost of construction in the Southwest versus the cost of construction out here, and the converse is true too for like water projects. It's a lot cheaper to put a water project in out here than it is on that side of the state, you know, with all the rock they've got. So, you know, there may be something to think about.
Appreciate that feedback. I think you're exactly right, and definitely think through that and see if there is any. It adds more administration burdens on us and on you all to kind of explain that and go through those different changes. If we have, you know, a sliding scale of kind of allowances, but at the same time, we might can be really incredibly efficient with our funds. So I think it's a good comment to look into, and we'll ask Rachel to kind of dive through that and see what we come up with. Appreciate that comment. I see a question about the local innovation. And so essentially, some of our open submission programs, local innovation being one of those, are an attempt to be somewhat flexible with CDBG funds. And so local innovation projects have been in the past, small business development, some loan funding for small business. It have been medical clinics or workforce development centers. Had a wide variety of kind of ideas that come through local innovation that typically aren't, they're less heavy on the infrastructure, if you will, the water, sewer, housing rehabilitation, or kind of facade work. So we can dive into more of what local innovation is in the how to apply session that comes up in March if you're interested, or we can talk to you offline. And so then I see a couple comments that 20 to 25% at least for maximums, evens upwards of 40%, and then increasing the locality caps. If you're not familiar, each locality has a $2.5 million cap on open grants at any one time. We do have waiver allowances, but we try not to have too many open grants per locality. But if we increase the award amounts, it would make sense to increase that per locality capacity limit, just so that you can have potentially one or two, more than one grant going on at one time. So appreciate that. Any other thoughts or comments on the grant awards before we keep moving? And if we didn't answer your comment or question, do throw it up, make sure we got it. All the comments and questions will be recorded also. So we can go back through and make sure we hit everything. But anything else? And great question, Ms. Austin. So federally recognized tribe, it does not allow us to do anything different with the elder care school. We can look at what type of facility you do have and think through if there's a way to kind of work through the locality to help like a nonprofit or even the designated tribe. We do partner with, the CDBG program that HUD administers directly, but also work through kind of the tribal designations and your council or your chief to think through opportunities on the federally recognized tribal land. So we can look at that, but it doesn't necessarily change the ability to do a school. And thanks, Mary. Feel free to throw questions on here and we can definitely come back to them, but Rachel, will lead us through.
Okie dokie. Well, this is just for planning grants. But how are the current award caps for planning grants? Some of these, like there are different tiers, I guess, based on the activities of a planning grant. Community organizing and community needs assessment planning grants are the lowest tier, $15 or 20,000 for some of the planning grants that require more heavy lifting, such as business district revitalization or housing rehab or comprehensive. Those are a bit more. But how do you all feel about the current planning grant award amounts? Okay, from Southside PDC, they seem happy with the current planning grant limits. And that's great. That's great. That means they're helpful. Okay. Okay, well, if anybody else has any thoughts about those limits, feel free to keep commenting in the chat. For now, we can go ahead and move on. So public services, this is a newer program. We rolled it out in 2022 as an open submission program. Some of the eligible public service activities are listed here, but overall, the public services program is meant to address a unique and pertinent need of a community. So childcare, what is kind of like a big, we know is a need throughout the state. Health services, fair housing counseling and housing education programs, food security, housing down payment assistance. All of these would be eligible under public service activities. However, in 2022, we had a few interested applicants in this program, but we have yet to fund a public service project. So yeah, we would just like to hear if there are any specific needs within public services that CDBG could be used to help address, or if it would be more helpful to I don't know, get more information out about the public service program. Yeah, we just want to know what would be more helpful with this public services program. And this is, yeah, a bit more of an open-ended question. But we just, yeah, wanted to open it up to you all and hear how this could be a better program or more useful.
With our public services, are we locked into a HUD service area, or can we write it as in a radius of the tribal grounds?
It could be a radius or a defined area by the grantee. And as an additional point, should we even prioritize this as a activity for the statewide program? Floor is yours, Miss Jonas.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. The one issue that was mentioned before that I could see, I know a perfect candidate for a public services grant. They're standing up a food bank and they want to provide comprehensive wraparound services, which would include housing counseling, but also quite a number of other sorts of resources in that same locality. But if the locality applies for this grant, they're going to hit that $2.5 million grant limit. So just another reiteration of what was said earlier about perhaps raising that cap.
Okay.
Thanks for that awareness.
Yeah.
And just these are usually smaller grants, so if the locality is going to jump up against it, if it's a great project, we'd love to help them with it. We can do waivers against the cap. Just a heads up, it's not a guarantee, but can do. But I think that's a great instance of having two, really good big neighborhood revitalization projects and having a smaller project that could do great benefit, but not having a cap. So it's a great comment.
Hey, Matt, this is Dwayne from Lena Whiskey. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm driving down the road trying to figure out how to unmute my phone, but can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hey, just real quick, and I probably missed this or it's on a slide that I can't see. For that public service pot you just mentioned, is there a maximum amount, or is there a that can be asked for that, or is it just following a normal, like a normal CDBG grant? Just curious.
So because these are not typically construction projects, the base right now is 250,000, but if it's a regional project, it can go up to $1 million.
Okay, and the reason I asked that, Rachel, is that, my 10 cents is worth a nickel on it. There's a lot of other funding sources out there for those types of programs. So I like to hear it's an actual smaller amount, because I can see in our area where it certainly would be of good need, but I also don't want to see it to a point where it becomes monopolized for stuff like that instead of serving some of the historic stuff that CDBG serves. So, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Anybody else have any questions about public services? Or any other thoughts? Okay, so still kind of on the funding topic. We do know that there are lots of other funding sources available to localities and community organizations. But we want to know, and this is, maybe even more open-ended, how can CDBG be used to better leverage other funding sources, like community development financed institution funds, and other state, federal, private, and nonprofit funding sources? So thinking about construction projects, housing, addressing affordable housing issues, different community services, economic development projects. How can CDBG funds be used to fill any gaps or work with other funding sources that might be more restrictive or have specific timelines? Yeah. What do you all think?
Yeah. Hey, this is Kelly Hitchcock. I mean, I'm probably like everyone else. It's like you have these ideas in your head. And of course, one of them is to have, um, you know, a, you know, 2 grant cycles. But again, recognizing from a logistical standpoint, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I mean, because that provides an opportunity to maybe more easily align with the cyclical nature of so many of these grants coming down the pike, as opposed to what we all do. And again, are thankful for the fact that we can do it, but we do the same thing for you guys in applications, where we say we put in an application and you have something like pending, or right, because you're not in a position to guarantee any of the match funds because you're layering these various applications. But that's the only thing that comes to mind.
This is especially helpful for us as we are the smallest tribe in the state. We're small, but we're mighty. We have a preschool, a cultural building and things of that nature that we're trying to shore up, and just looking into other funding sources to better serve our citizens at large.
Okay, well, all of that information has been helpful. And also I should have mentioned this earlier. If there are things that require more explanation than putting it in the chat, or you don't feel comfortable speaking, you're always welcome to email Matt or myself. And our contact information will be available at the end of this. But yeah, so now just wanted to open it up even more. This is the time to talk about literally anything CDBG, our competitive process, our open submission process, planning grants, timeline. Yeah, anything. Do you have any questions about the CDBG program, or project ideas, or recommendations, or concerns? Now is the time to bring those up.
So Sanji, I will double check on the depot requirements and kind of where we're at with that. I don't remember exactly, unless, you know, Kathy or Joanne, if you guys are on, or Amanda, and want to answer that. Otherwise, we'll check on it and get back to you. And then I can definitely take in the input of increasing the amounts.
Yeah, this is Kelly again, and I'm not sure that this is the right forum, but y'all will tell me if it is or isn't. When we're talking about the housing program for CDBG, is it the intention that the program remains no ability to pay, or is that while that CDBG's or DHCD's program requirements, can a locality institute some minimum to generate program income, or how?
Yet currently not with statewide CDBG, you can't. The program income requirements for reporting and tracking have changed over the years, and it's become really burdensome for us to, as an agency, have subgrantees, and then the localities then subgrant it even further to a nonprofit housing or to the PDC or to others to implement. The tracking gets really cumbersome, and we've found that we've gotten dinged in the past through monitoring that we're not doing as good a job that program income, which is why we did away with it. We know it does open up a lot of activities that you all can fund more expeditiously, help people with different housing activities, but it's the tracking and the reporting has just become cumbersome and not always the most reliable to have that information back. The limit also is $35,000. So if a locality generates $35,000 or more in program income, it has to all come back to HUD, not to DHCD, not to the locality, to HUD. And then it gets repurposed back out through our state program. So the requirements for program income have become almost prohibitive to really allow what we used to do with it. So it's a great comment, Kelly. We'll look for maybe other ways of thinking through that. And if we can figure out a way that's works, we'll try to open it back up in instances where it works out.
Thank you. That was good information as far as understanding the kind of the domino effect of why thank you.
Yeah, you guys have done such great work with program income, and you don't have to wait on us to go and spend it, which is great. But yeah, just the reporting and the tracking of it has been challenging. We'd love to figure out a way, though, to maximize the efforts you all put into communities and housing rehab projects. So we'll keep thinking on that and get back to you at a future date. Stephen, yeah, thanks for the comment about the rural emergency services. Virginia does not, and we have not really funded, especially equipment purchases. We may have once or twice in the 37 or 8, maybe 40 years of CDBG existence, funded the actual building associated with a rural emergency services facility. But even that, the need is so great across the state. We would be out of $18 million before we even got the allocation from HUD every single year if we did that. And we have had a hard time justifying putting, $2 or $3 million toward that. And then how do you pick and choose one locality over the other for how to fund those? So that's the main reason why we haven't gotten into that. Pennsylvania is the one I know pretty well that does it. And they have a more of like an entitlement program where every locality gets a small piece every year of the CDBG pie. So we'll take that under advisement and bring it to the group just for the needs. You gave us some really good stats. We'll bring that up, and but I don't think we're going to be doing that for 2023, but I'll bring that to the group. Small business financing potentially could be considered in the CDBG grant world. We generally don't like to give money to a for-profit entity outright, but in the certain situations or in a loan or in different programmatic pieces, we have done revolving loans where they repay the money back to an organization that gets reprogrammed back into small business development in a community. But just outright grants we have not done with CDBG, but you have a grant to a larger entity. And that would be a local innovation, most likely following some kind of downtown revitalization effort. And we can, if you have some questions, definitely go into that in more detail off this, outside of this input session. And then Joe, thanks for joining the party, and appreciate raising the admin and then for rehab specialists. It's a great comment. Man, you all have really quick typing, or that's a novel. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna read Erica's. If you have any other comments or questions, feel free to pipe up. And this is great, good conversation and good information for us to consider.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It's super helpful to hear.
All right, so Erica, you're talking about moving away from what we call a concentrated area or targeted area into more of a scattered site for housing rehabilitation. Appreciate that comment. We allow scattered sites in some instances through the open submission program. The reason why we don't do tons of scattered site or just allow every housing rehabilitation project to be scattered site is because, well, twofold. One, you can't show the benefit to someone that comes in to monitor the program. They just see 5 houses out of 500 that have been improved versus 5 houses out of 20 or even 10 that actually brings the neighborhood up and gives them, hopefully a more concentrated bang for your buck. Secondly, it's too easy to pick and choose who gets to participate. And not that you all are bad stewards of your communities, because you're on here and you're giving us great feedback of how to improve. So I know you're the awesome ones, but there are entities and players out there that wouldn't choose not to serve someone because they have the ability to. So scattered site can be a lot less kind of diligent in bringing the entire community up. For those towns, cities, or counties that really have engaged in housing rehab for several years, have been diligent in having a plan or a strategy for how they improve communities throughout the overall locality, we allow scattered site in instances. So there is an opportunity, Erica, and your all's PDC footprint has had some really great localities that have a strategy for it. If there's instances for the need for scattered site, we're happy to think through that with you and see where we can go. But as a whole, we like doing more of a neighborhood revitalization effort as opposed to scattered site. If everyone on here comes out and screaming for more scattered site, we can definitely consider it. But that's kind of our approach so far while we've been in the same way. So Mary joined Erica. So we got 2 for scattered site. So areas not considered economically distressed, but also have a high income. How are they evaluated for ability and competitiveness? It depends on what you're applying for. So some of our, like housing rehabilitation, is a direct low to moderate income benefit. So if you have 5 houses that you're rehabbing, even if the surrounding area has high income levels or it's a higher less economically disadvantaged area, those 5 units are the ones that are being improved, and you would score just fine. If you are doing a water or sewer line improvement and you're serving 20 houses but only 5 are LMI, you are not going to meet the qualifications, and therefore it will be more challenging. There may be pockets of Goochland where we can design a project, in different areas to get some of the, Swiss cheese effect where development has left out. If you have pockets of low to moderate income opportunities, we can work through that with you and thinking through it. Overall, though, areas or localities that have had have less, have higher incomes or less economic disadvantaged or distress aren't always the easiest larger project for CDBG. But we're, again, as Rachel said, we're happy to think through projects with you and for you to serve some of the ideas you have. Appreciate the cost limits, Sanji. It's a good thought. Joe's late to the game and is bringing back up negatively impacted from inflation. But good comment at the end for increased per connection for public infrastructure. Sorry, Jimmy. Joe beat you to it. Wayne Watts will be proud. Although I think Joe, you may have gone full Jeff Cochran on us and thought 50,000. Why not go for 100?
Good call.
Jerry Davis, are you still on here?
Yeah, Matt, I'm on here.
Oh, great. Hey, so real quick, in the eastern side of the state where you don't have as much rock and different things, are you seeing where, you know, $30,000 or $25,000 per connection, like that well replacement project, did that get you as much as you needed?
I mean, I think so.
Just trying to think of in relation to per connection. So if you're not aware, we allow 20,000 for water and 25,000 per sewer. Oftentimes, you know, as you start getting into infrastructure development, it becomes way too cost prohibitive, and you look for 7 different funding sources as opposed to 1 or 2. So I was just trying to think through on the eastern side of the state, if 30,000 per connection would fulfill some of the infrastructure development project ideas you all had. And not to put you on the spot, you don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, we're not running into rock and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, Rachel.
Okay, so finishing up our presentation today. This is just our program for 2023, our timeline. So the competitive application will be due June 1st. The application will open shortly after our how to apply, which will be March 22nd. And then the open submission programs as well as planning grants will open July 1st and will run through the end of the year or as long as funds remain. Just for full transparency, last year we did run out of planning grant funds by the end of the year. So just throwing that out there, I would recommend not waiting until the very end of the year. But yeah, our open submission programs, they're non-competitive, available on a first come, first served basis, as long as funding remains. And Matt and I, as well as other CDBG staff, are open to talking about your projects, answering any of your questions about the application or timing or funding or eligible activities. Yeah, always happy to meet with anybody about that. And just some tips. Yeah, don't wait till the last minute. Project development obstacles can come up at any time, especially with larger construction projects and housing rehab projects. And then PDCs, your planning district commissions, are very helpful. They're familiar with CDBG as well as community needs. So we recommend contacting your PDCs also for help. And then, yeah, planning grant funds will be available beginning July 1st. And here is our contact information, our email addresses, Matt Weaver, myself, and then Kelly is our CDBG planning grant specialist. So yeah, we are available anytime with any questions and to hear about your projects. So yeah, and just want to reiterate that if you wanted to say something but didn't have a chance today, you can always email us with any of your thoughts or feedback. We would welcome those. So thank you all so much. DHCD will stay online for a little bit if anybody has any last minute questions. But thank you all.
Okay, thank you guys. Great meeting.